Hey, my name is Ethan Nicolle, and I am the author of a book that I wrote and I drew. It's called Brave Ollie Possum. And this book was inspired by reading to my kids at night, finding that they liked spooky, silly stories. They're very epic. And so this book is about a boy named Ollie who wants to face his fears because he's kept up every night by this vision of a monster that looks in his window. His therapist turns out to be an actual monster. And in the course of the book, Ollie, the little boy, is transformed into a possum, which is the most terrified animal on Earth. Because when they get scared, they just kind of keel over and freeze up. So he has to learn to face his fears in other ways rather than just wanting to scream and run to his parents, because he can't now. He's a possum. He becomes friends with the forest animals and has to figure out how to get his life back before the potion sets in permanently. So Ollie lives in a small town called Moose Point on a mountain. His parents have an Italian restaurant that's failing, and his dad is a frustrated chef because nobody comes to eat food at his restaurant. And Ollie keeps his parents up every night because he screams every time he sees this monster in his window, which everybody assumes he's imagining. He screams his brains out, goes running to his parents' room, and jumps in their bed. We're going to jump in on the second chapter of the book. And so here we go. Chapter 2, A Crooked Card. As the groggy chef clumped down the stairs to start another weary day of pasta making, Ollie sat on the edge of the bed and ran his fingers through Willoughby's golden fur. He wondered why he had allowed himself to make another night miserable for his parents. Willoughby rested his chin on the boy. The tender-hearted dog was the only member of the family who didn't seem concerned with trying to change him. Ollie wanted to do something today that would make his papa proud. He didn't know how to overcome his fears, but he had one thing up his sleeve that might impress the man. He had perfected his own special lasagna recipe. Despite the chef not taking the time to teach him, Ollie had watched the lasagna process countless times, studied the recipes, and snuck into the kitchen in the evenings to practice. Today, he would show his dad what he could do. He hurried down the stairs to begin preparations, but his mother stopped him. "Son, if you want to get your father's attention, do not cook lasagna for breakfast," she advised. "Who eats lasagna for breakfast? Make it later, after he's tired, and the day is near its end. If you try to get his attention at the wrong time, it could only make things worse." She patted him on the head and smiled. Ollie's mother had mastered the art of dancing around his moody father like a gold medal figure skater. So Ollie waited. The clock, a wood carving of an obnoxiously jolly chef, ticked and talked, its dimples getting more annoying with every shift of its plastic eyes. He waited through morning prep, lunch rush, which was not much of a rush at all, and dinner, also not a huge turnout. Ollie watched his dad go without a single break from 6 in the morning to 7 at night, working as if every move he made was the last pull of an oar that would keep his ship afloat. Finally, Mr. Mackerelli gave her son the nod. He stepped into the kitchen, where Mr. Mackerelli was chopping onions, and began quietly working. "What's this?" Mr. Mackerelli asked abruptly. Ollie winced. His mother spoke for him. "It's just a little project. Don't worry. He'll stay out of your way." "Dear, if we have another customer." "Then he'll get out of your way." She put her hand on the man. He sighed and continued dicing. Ollie took a deep breath. The restaurant was empty. They would close at 9. Only half an hour left, and he was home free. He had just finished making the noodles from scratch, garnering lots of praise from his mother, though still not a comment from his dad when he heard He nearly spilled the marinara everywhere. Willoughby jumped to his paws and barked at top volume. Mr. Mackerelli shushed the dog and looked toward the sound 2 stories up, but loud enough to shake the ceiling. He was about to comment when suddenly there came another sound. Ding! It was the bell on the entryway door in the dining room. Mr. Mackerelli's eyes lit up. "A customer! Quiet down, Willoughby. Don't scare them off." Ollie's heart sank. They never had customers this late. Why, tonight of all nights, did one need to come in now and ruin everything? "Clear this away. I will need room to cook," the chef said, waving his hands at Ollie's work without giving it a glance. There was more joy in his voice than Ollie had heard all day. The boy, slowly pulled out the garbage can on wheels, preparing to toss the whole thing into the trash. A lump formed in his throat. Then Willoughby went into another flurry of wild barks and darted right out into the dining room, abandoning his designated doggy corner and every rule in the doggy rule book. Mr. Mackerelli chased after him, shouting. As they ran into the dining room, the door opened. The last-minute customer barely fit through the doorway. She looked like an ogre stuffed inside the skin of an old obese woman, clad in bright polyester. Her skinny arms stuck out of her bulbous body like sticks in a snowman. She wore pointy sunglasses and had big shriveled red lips. Her face dripped with thick white paint, and a tall pink beehive wig sat perched on her head. She seated herself at a 2-person table, right next to an impressionistic painting of a meatball ascending to heaven. The chair nearly disappeared beneath her rhino-sized rump. Willoughby charged at her, barking like he smelled a rat. "Willoughby, you know better," Mr. Mackerelli shouted. The usually obedient dog winced back with a look of guilt. He was directed back into the kitchen by an angry, outstretched finger. Ollie, startled by the dog's outburst, sat and stroked his fur. Willoughby growled in a low rumble, as if keeping quiet was impossible. Mr. Mackerelli promptly came to the patron's table with his chef's hat fluffed and handlebar mustache waxed and curled to perfection. He handed her a menu and spoke with desperate hospitality. "Welcome to Mackerelli's. We are pleased to serve you. Today's special is the garlic, bacon, and 16-cheese lasagna." He lifted a pen and pad of paper. "May I start you with something to drink?" She exhaled. It suddenly smelled as if someone had opened a jar of dead flies. Mr. Mackerelli's mustache twitched, but his smile remained locked in place. The guest rubbed her greasy chin as she studied the menu. Her sweaty clown face looked like it was melting off. She had caked on enough makeup to sauce a pizza. Mr. Mackerelli noticed white drops landing on the carpet. He gritted his teeth, hoping it wouldn't be too hard to clean. She wiped her hand on her blouse, then turned the page. Finally, she spoke in a squeaky, raspy voice. "Not a lot of customers for a Friday." The man nodded. She continued. "You must really struggle." He raised an eyebrow. The woman spoke as unnaturally as she looked. "Yes, it has been hard," he said. His pen remained poised. It had been harder than he had time or desire to explain. "That just breaks my little heart. Such yummy, lummy foodies, too." She spoke with the inflection one might use to comfort a baby. The result was not comforting. "So just water to drink?" he asked. It seemed the longer he stood there, the more he could feel her bad breath settling on him like a rotten mist. "It must be even harder," she said, "with that little boy of yours." She peered at the chef over the rims of her pointed shades, revealing pale yellow eyes. Mr. Mackerelli stepped back. "You have heard my son's cries. I apologize," he said in a quiet voice. "He is a troubled boy." He finally lowered the pen. The curls of his mustache seemed to lose some of their spring. He could no longer hold a smile. No, we were all kiddly-widdlies once. Nightmares and boogie-woogie men, vivid little imaginations scaring the heebies and the jeebies out of us. Living out here by the big dark woods, where people go out and get lost and never founded. I know they scared me when I was a little kidsy." She said that laughing with a strained authenticity. It was as if speaking of herself as a child secretly caused her pain. The chef rubbed the back of his neck. "No, not like my son. I have never seen a child so overcome with fear. Ever since we moved here, all day and night, he screams and cries. And it only gets worse. We are known better by his nightly screams than my signature dish." She reached out a long-fingered hand and touched his arm.
Well, the little kitty can't go on like that. He'll destroy you, the miserable thing. It must break your heart.
She was laying on the baby talk thicker as she spoke.
You look so sleepy weepy. I bet you get so tired that sometimes you fall asleep right in the lasagna. Yeah, no thanks to little... What's the boy's name?
She leaned in to hear the answer. Ollie. His name is Ollie, Mr. Mackerelli said quietly, backing out of the conversation with a blank stare and a nod. I will get you a water. He turned away, now more uncomfortable with how correct she was than how bad she smelled. His son was miserable, and it did break his heart. And it was true. He had fallen asleep in the lasagna a few times. He returned to the kitchen. Ollie, instead of putting everything away, had resolved to get his project done as quickly as possible. As the chef walked past, Ollie winced, expecting to be told to get out. But instead, Mr. Mackerelli leaned against the counter, took a few deep breaths, and fidgeted with the end of his mustache. He looked deep in thought. Is there anything I can do to help, Papa? Ollie asked. Mr. Mackerelli looked at the boy for a moment before answering. Then he poured water into a glass and handed it to him. Bring the customer this glass of water, please. Be polite. Yes, Papa. Ollie pushed the swinging door open with the glass in hand. Due to Willoughby's reaction to the guest, he felt fear swelling in him as he pushed through. But the boy only found an empty chair. Papa? He called out. There's no one here. Upon seeing the empty table, Mr. Mackerelli put his head in his hands, calling out to no one, No, don't leave, please stay. Eat, I will throw in a free cannoli. The chef slumped over onto the table, all the fight out of him. Another lost customer. Another day most of the food he'd prepared would be thrown out. Another day closer to closing down. Then he saw sitting on the abandoned table a crooked paper card. It read, Fear-filled child? Call Miss Fuzzle-Buzzle. Professional anti-scary therapy and comfortology. Ph.D. in tear and fear reduction. Good sleepies and warm fuzzies. Free consultations. Call 899, then whatever numbers come to mind. Mr. Mackerelli saw a trail of melted makeup drops leading out the door. He followed the path of white spots outside. They ended just beyond the entrance, not even reaching the parking lot. It was as if the enormous woman had lifted off into the night sky. And that is chapter 2. So, what do you think? Do you think that that lady is really an anti-scare therapy doctor or something else, something horrible, something that possibly likes eating children?